Welcome into Shot and Vip, a podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina this football season by Johnny T-Shirt. Co-hosting this, I'm Taylor Vippolis, joined as always by my fellow Carolina football letterman and teammate Jeff Schoettmer. Shot, humiliating, embarrassing, not enough words to describe how bad it was at Carter Finley. Carolina loses 39-20 to NC State. Carolina now 8-4 on the season. Season's kind of spiraled out of control since Carolina started 6-0. What was your main takeaway from the State game?
Well, Vip, I'm recording this podcast in Dallas, and it's cold and wet and rainy and gloomy here, and I promise you, it's way worse in North Carolina right now. Take all the excuses you can think of and throw them out the window. The wet turf, the cleat situation, the personal fouls on Atkinson or Chapman, the field goal debacle at the end of the first half. Throw all those out the window. We got out-physicaled, out-coached, out-hit, out-executed, out-schemed. We were playing the biggest game of the year versus an opponent that we hate, or most of us hate, and we lay the biggest egg of the year. Bigger egg, in my opinion, than GT and Virginia. In the most critical game of the year, in my opinion, we play our worst half of football, which was the first half of that game, and arguably the most important half of the season. Our body language was terrible. Our effort was terrible. Physicality was nowhere to be found. Execution, like I mentioned, was like the energy on the sideline was non-existent. And we just completely laid an egg in all phases of the game, from offense, defense, special teams, equipment, staff, you name it, coaching. We laid an egg, and for things to go how they did the last 2 years, the 2021 game, that nightmare at NC State, to be up 9 with 2 minutes to go and lose that game. And then following the next year, 2022, where we lose, in Keenan in overtime, and, State players go get their flag and plant it on the UNC logo at midfield, with our guys watching it. And just with all that building up over the last 2 years, because a lot of the current players on the UNC team and coaches coached or played in those games. And that should just build the fuel, and for us to have all that, riding on the game, and this is how we perform. It's truly, like I've said this year, I think the worst game we've ever had was Georgia Tech, and then I followed it up in Virginia, same thing. Like, this one is just leaps and bounds above that one. So, I think I spent 2 or 3 minutes talking about what I thought, but that's it.
There was a few times in that game. Yeah, there was a few times in that game, actually, where it was a 19-point game. It felt even worse than 19. There was a few moments where you're like trying to talk yourself into believing, where it's like, hey, if Drake could go down the field and score, get it to 12 in halfway through the third quarter, maybe the defense can get a stop. But like, even outside of those moments, from the very first drive, it just felt like Carolina was not in this game. We've said the word outplayed, outcoached so many times the past 3 years. And that's why when Carolina does lose this game, I'm not even surprised, because this is just who this team has been, where you have a defense that opens the game with 8 straight possessions where NC State scores. It's going to be hard to win any type of games like that. You have a North Carolina team with a quarterback like Drake Maye, and they don't complete a pass until the second quarter. The playing surface looked like a slip and slide for North Carolina, but NC State, they looked faster. They looked more physical in the trenches. They looked faster and they looked more physical in the trenches. That's going to be another tough thing to kind of overcome. And yeah, this is 3 straight losses now to NC State. And you look at the advantages that North Carolina has. Carolina's NIL is probably a significant upgrade from whatever NC State has there, and being able to get players in the transfer portal. Recruiting, Carolina has out-recruited NC State since Mac Brown has gotten back. They have the advantage at the most important position, the quarterback position. But from the moment that game started, Carolina did not look ready to play. NC State had all the intensity, and it's a rivalry game. Like if you can't get your guys prepared for this game, like what can you prepare them for? And when I say like this is who this North Carolina team has been, you look at the trends for this team, and right now I have the last 5 Power 5 games Carolina's played the last 3 years, and the 2023 numbers are going to change if Carolina plays a Power 5 team in a bowl game. And the only way they wouldn't is if they went to somewhere like the Military Bowl when Carolina played Temple and you don't get a Power 5 opponent. Most likely going to play a Power 5 opponent in the bowl game, but 2021, their last 5 games against a Power 5 opponent, 1-4. Last 5 Power 5 games in 2022 against a Power 5 opponent, 1-4. Right now in 2023, 1-4. Carolina's 2-4 to close out this year. One of those wins was against a Duke team with a third-string quarterback that they had to eke out. The win probability didn't favor them late. And the other win is a win against an FCS Campbell team. Like that's really the frustrating part for me for being somebody who cares about the program, where this team just does not look competitive in a lot of these games against NC State or against the Georgia Techs, where like you can't say like we have to recruit better or we need more NIL, because those schools don't have that advantage. So it really comes down to your coaching and your players' ability to execute a game plan. And I think part of it too is that the moment I knew Carolina was in trouble, I did think Carolina would win this game, because I thought eventually the playmakers that Carolina had would take over. Martin Hampton, Tez Walker, Drake Maye. But the moment where I kind of had this feeling like, oh no, like something might be off here, is when in the midweek press conference, Mac Brown is saying like, I don't wake up every day hating NC State. I like their coaches. I love their players. Brennan Armstrong, I've played him now at 2 different schools. I feel like I've grown up with him. And then you compare that, or you contrast that to somebody like Dave Doeren, who I think is a pretty below average college football coach. I don't think there's anything special in what he does besides having his team ready to play in these games, where they're taking, it feels personal when Dave Doeren's talking about this North Carolina program. When you hear Peyton Wilson talk about this North Carolina program, it feels personal. And the way that North Carolina approached it, when, you talked about the 2022 game, they're getting flags planted at their midfield. That has to be personal. And for me, it's like this North Carolina team just wildly unprepared for the environment that they were stepping into in Carter Finley from the moment they got off the bus. You kind of take on the identity of your head coach. He's publicly saying that North Carolina isn't a school that wins 9 games with any sort of regularity. 9 wins is good and it's a drastic change from the preseason when they're saying 9 wins isn't enough. And then we kind of wonder why this team lacks a killer mindset when the guy who's in charge is saying, no, 9 wins is good enough. 9 wins, fans should be happy with that or accept that. And it's like, how many teams would love to win 8 wins? Or when Carolina was 6-1, how many teams would love to have 6 wins at that point? Like, how many teams would love to have Drake Maye, Martin Hampton, Tez Walker, Cedric Gray, Kamon Rucker, Elijah Huzzy? That's where I think a lot of the frustration comes from this North Carolina fan base, as they sit here on Monday wondering like what's happening to this Carolina football program. And yet, what did you kind of see from the mindsets that both teams had entering, where Dave Doeren, you could it's palpable how much he hates the North Carolina program, and for North Carolina, they do have that kind of just happy to be here mentality.
It was on display. We displayed it through our play. talk is cheap, and let the pads do the talking, and they let the pads do the talking. I go back to two quotes that Dave said after the game. One was something, there's nothing better than beating those baby blue boys. This was when he was talking to the ESPN reporter post game, and then I saw a clip of him in the locker room talking to his own players, saying 1,000 some days since those pieces of shit beat us, and like that mentality is what you want your head coach to embody. I mean, like, that's in a rivalry game, like that's how you want your head coach to stick up for you and talk about the other team. I can't really put it into words like how frustrating it is, because when you looked on our sideline, it just looked like, first of all, like I mentioned, there was no energy. There was no juice other than like AJ Blue, who's brought it every day for the last, however many days he's been on earth. But like the players didn't seem to have it. And that's why I think there's a disconnect going on. I think there's a disconnect, amongst the coaching staff. I think there's a disconnect amongst the players and the coaching staff. And I think there's a little disconnect amongst the players. And I know they say they've got each other's back, but they damn sure didn't play like it. And they haven't for the last couple of games. And like I said, we can sit up here and talk about, not we, but, the UNC staff and the UNC players and coaches, and talk about, how they're this close and they're going to keep fighting. But like, show us how you're going to do it. And, at this point, it's a little too late in the season to do that now. But frustrating, obviously, because it's NC State and we knew the magnitude of this game. And, I infamously put out a tweet prior to the game, and I was, calling my shot and saying that I was guaranteeing a UNC victory, because that's how confident I felt. I thought at the end of the day, like, NC State does have a good defense. We have just as quote unquote talented players as them. We have the X factor at quarterback. We have better skill players on offense. And I guess I didn't take into account, the stadium, the culture, just their overall NC State's grittiness and want to, versus our guys who, looked very reluctant and hesitant and not confident, and, all the adjectives that aren't synonymous with winning. So,
yeah, I think that want to is the biggest thing that was probably easy to overlook going into this game, because you look at what North Carolina has, and I think there was a lot riding on this game with both teams 8-3. Carolina, some disappointing losses, losing at Clemson when they didn't take advantage of some opportunities they had. You lose a home game against Virginia as a 20-plus point favorite, where you win that game if you just hand the ball off to Amar and Hampton and let him do his thing. You lose a game to Georgia Tech. But there was a sense like, hey, if Carolina could just get right for this last game, win against NC State, against a ranked NC State team, then the perception of the season could be saved a bit, to where the season didn't feel like a failure. And I think sitting here on Monday, the season does feel like a failure when you have Drake Maye, when you're not playing for a conference championship, when you're 500 in the ACC, when you lose the third straight year to NC State. It's hard to not say that this season was really anything but a failure. And I think one of the reasons why Carolina lost this game so decisively at Carter Finley was the play on both lines of scrimmage. What did you see from Carolina on the offensive line and the defensive front?
We were overmatched on both sides of the ball. I mean, you start the first drive of the game when we take the field, and the first run play we run, Hampton gets smoked in the backfield for -2. We couldn't get any push on their interior guys all night. And majority of the time they were lining up with 3 down linemen and playing what's called a tough front, which is 2 4 eyes and a shade. And, we have 5 offensive linemen against 3. Obviously there's some overhangs and linebackers that get in the mix, but just our initial push was not there. And then pass protection wise, like there was times where they were rushing 3 or 4 and still getting home within, 2.5, 3 seconds, which is, very quick. And then I was more so disappointed on the defensive line. Like NC State doesn't have a great offensive line. They haven't put up a bunch of offensive statistics all year, and we just got pushed around. Our footwork was awful, and I'm not just saying footwork due to the field. It was our steps were awful. Our hand placement was awful. When an offensive line, like for example, Des Evans, when an offensive line zones away and he's the edge of the defense, he's taught his specific rule is to squeeze the hip of the tackle and put hands on shoulder pads, hands on hips, and create movement. And just watching his technique was awful all night. And that eventually affects the linebackers behind him. A play that I can't get out of my head was Miles Murphy. This is on the first drive of the second half, and NC State runs an outside zone scheme on our sideline, and Miles Murphy is legitimately driven 12 to 14 yards down the field. And at one point he does like a pirouette, and like as a simple zone scheme, like he can't even fight back enough and he's 12 yards down the field. It was one of the, I don't want to, call out players specifically, but like that's awful, awful football. And for us to be able to sit there and watch that, like in my opinion, he shouldn't have gone back in the game after that. Like a coach got to see that on the sideline. It's like, this guy cannot help us win the game. He's not helping us win the game. And that's just kind of like, I guess the culture that we've accepted is like, we have quote unquote no other guys to go in the game for him because we can't develop depth. I guess went off on a little tangent there, but your question was talking about, the lines of scrimmage. And I think part of on the offensive line struggle was, first of all, Tony Gibson is an unbelievable defensive coordinator, but I think we are very predictable with our offensive schemes. And Phil Longo's offense was the same way because, when I was in the defensive room with Jay Bateman, we would go against them in spring and fall camp. And so we had a good beat on them. And I think the offenses are very similar. But what I see is when there's not a tight end attached to the core, meaning he's not, in the backfield or he's not attached to the hip of the tackle or in a 3-point stance next to the tackle, when he's not in the core of the offense, NC State had a 3-man rush and usually played coverage. When we had a tight end, in or around the offensive line or 1 or 2 or more, they were bringing the house. There was multiple times. There was probably 10 plus times that they brought quote unquote cover zero blitzes where they're getting a beat on our, they know when we're going to run the ball. So they were just bringing the house. So credit to them for that, but we could not get any push regardless whether they were blitzing or rushing 3. So just bad showing from everybody.
Yeah, it was bad, just bad football all around. You look at some of the accountability for players making bad plays is something that I feel like we've talked about a good amount, where it was one of the complaints I had last week against the Clemson game, where you have a player with a personal foul penalty, and you don't even let him come out to think about like, hey, you can't be putting the team in a position like that. And you saw the same thing happen on Saturday. And there's just no accountability for like, hey, if I don't do my job here, or if I put the team in a bad situation, I'm just going to keep playing. So if I'm just going to keep playing, maybe my mistake wasn't that bad because I'm still in this game and I'm still going on to the next play. And you look at some of these snap numbers for this defensive, for the defense and the offense too, to be honest, where Carolina Carolina played 4 wide receivers. Tez Walker, 63 snaps, J.J. Jones, 48 snaps, Ty Chapman, 18 snaps, Gavin Blackwell, 14 snaps. One of the other things that kind of came out too, speaking on that receiver depth, one of the players that torched Carolina, Casey Concepcion, apparently the Carolina evaluation from him was he was too small to play, and that's why he was too small to play at Carolina, and that's why they were so late in his recruitment. And by the time they even got in the recruitment, he was already kind of mind made up that he was going to state. He torches Carolina. A lot of motivation for a player like that going into this game to kind of prove to what he can do. And Carolina has a bunch of NFL talent on the field. He looked like the best player the entire night. He looked faster than everybody. It looked like NC State couldn't get him the ball enough with the impact that he was making. What did you see from him, and what Carolina couldn't really do against him?
I mean, he did it all. He ran the ball well. He ran great routes. He found the end zone. He was tough. He was banged up a couple of times, kept coming back in the game. He was talking shit to our guys. I mean, he was the full package on Saturday night. And the frustrating thing was we couldn't ID him as a defense. Going into the game, I think he's their only playmaker. They have a linebacker turned running back, and Armstrong is a savvy guy, and he's actually torched us a couple of years in a row now. And they have a couple other good receivers, but they aren't all ACC
game changer,
first, second, third round guys. Like Clemson had better skill than them. And so the thing with Robert and I's offense, it's very tricky to defend, but if you just ID where the best player is on any given play, like he got the ball like half the time, half the game. They threw it to him, they ran it with him, and it just looked like we were so lost out there and shocked that every time when he got the ball, when he was in the backfield, they were handing it to him. When he was out wide, they were running crossing routes and isolation routes for him, and we just couldn't pick up on that. And I don't think he's that much better than Tez Walker, and we're seeing Tez Walker in practice all the time. Like it's just, that was frustrating to me. Some of the other things that bothered me with the coaching adjustments was, let's go to the first drive of the second half. We're down 26-7, 23-7, whatever it was going to be, whether they got the field goal or not. That's 3 possessions, obviously. Okay. NC State, we knew they were getting the ball. We literally had a chance to change the momentum of the game, with a defensive stop, or even just holding them to a field goal instead of a touchdown. But you know what? NC State goes 8 plays, 75 yards right out of halftime, and kind of puts the nail in the coffin. I already talked about the stretch play that they ran, and Miles Murphy got driven 14 yards back. But the touchdown on that drive, if you look at it, they had a 3rd and 9 in their red zone, and we ran the exact same cover 0 blitz as we did versus Duke when we let up that touchdown late in the game. And it was the same exact execution. NC State blocked it different than Duke did. They full slid the line and left 2 unblocked guys. Amari Gaynor was untouched. He slipped on the snap, but no one was accounting for him. The running back was blocking the edge guy, and they left Amari Gaynor untouched. Obviously, he slipped. And the other thing we changed was, we ended up pressing the corner there. So, they did just converted it to a fade and obviously beat our cornerback on the play. I think it was Marcus Allen. But like the coaching adjustments that we didn't have in the second half to help our guys, I wouldn't put it all in the coaching staff, because the players, they have to execute and play more physical and play tougher, et cetera. But like the fact that, we're down that many points at halftime and we can't find a way to get a stop at all in the third quarter. And, the other thing, like we subbed a defensive lineman in when NC State gets a gets a first down in the red zone, and we're subbing in a defensive lineman. I think Bo Atkinson in for Des Evans. I think we burn a timeout there because they were going to get a 12-minute on the field. Another thing that bothered me was Casey Concepcion. They put him at Wildcat quarterback, and we don't ID him, first of all, and our linebackers or safeties are playing coverage like he's going to throw the ball. I mean, maybe he is Boobie Miles and he can pass, but we haven't seen that yet. Like, he's going to get the ball and run it. And I don't know. I'm just going off on a tangent, but there's so many things that were frustrating in that game, obviously.
Yeah, it was a lot of bad, not much good. There was a few times where Carolina just did not look even close to being set before NC State was running plays. There was one in the red zone. I don't think it was the one that they had to take a timeout on, because I think NC State wound up getting a playoff. But it was going right before the first half ended, and Travis Shaw split out wide because NC State had like a strange formation, and Travis Shaw
flexed out the guard and tackle out to
and Travis Shaw is caught not knowing should he go out there, should he come back to where the center and the quarterback were. He tries to do the thing where you just go down and pretend you're hurt. I think that's what you said.
Scuba. Take a dive, and
I think that's what he did, but it also could have been the field playing where he just slipped under him. And that's just what Carolina looked like the entire night. I remember thinking right after the first possession that Carolina was in a lot of trouble and that this game could get pretty ugly pretty quickly. But let's take a quick break so I can remind everybody about Johnny T-Shirt. Our friends at Johnny T-Shirt are the ones that bring us this podcast, so support them. You could visit them online at johnnytshirt.com or visit them on Franklin Street if you're going to be in Chapel Hill. If you're going to be in Chapel Hill for the ACC SEC Challenge against Tennessee, make sure you stop by Johnny T-Shirt and get all the Carolina apparel that you could possibly want. It's great people, great customer service. They've got the jerseys, the T-shirts, the hats. It's getting colder. They have the cold gear. They can have everything you could possibly want as we get into the holiday season. And don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. Shot, future of Carolina football. Where does Carolina go from here?
I do think it's a complicated question. I think what we know as of now is obviously Max said he's coming back. Obviously, he has to say that when he gets asked by the media in week 10 of the year. He can't say, I'm retiring after this year, or I got one more year in me, because how that will affect recruiting and whatnot. But as what we know right now, he's coming back. I believe this upcoming week in Carolina football, we are going to see some changes, whether that's from the head coach or the defensive coordinator, defensive line, or receivers coach, or who special teams coordinator, whoever it is. We should and will see changes. I just think, I guess your question, I'm going to get to your question, but how many times have we heard, I did not have the guys prepared, this loss is on me. Players have a shelf life, and so should coaches. This is a production business. And Coach Brown always says that. And, if players are not producing, they are replaced. It's on to the next guy, the next recruit, the backup gets a shot. And if you are openly admitting that you're not doing your job as a head coach, then something should happen too. Like if we had all the ingredients for a special year. And I think at the end of the day, our culture won or lost, however you look at it. At the end of the day, the backbone of our program wasn't strong enough, and that's what led to the catastrophic losses towards the end of the year, the 4 out of 5 or 4 out of 6 games we lost. That's happened year after year after year. And I think our true colors were shown. I've been very, I guess what I should say is, regardless of how much success you've had in your career, I think there's an expiration date to everybody. Do I think that Max stepping down or potentially being fired is the right move for the future of Carolina football going forward? I possibly think we need, new direction at the top of the food chain. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. Look, I don't get paid enough to say what I really think should happen. If I was the AD, I would be able to make a decision. But I just think we've seen what will happen with Coach Brown as the head coach, and you are what you repeatedly do. And I don't think there's going to be drastic changes in terms of our production and our ability to win more games and win bigger games. Like, I think we are what we are right now as a program. And if our administration and our athletic department has to figure out what they want to prioritize, because, we have a generational quarterback and we're winning 8 games. So that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, and I think part of it when saying that it is a lot more complicated, you have to take into account that Carolina is going to be looking for a new chancellor. You have the board of trustees that it feels like they can't agree on anything, and it's one of the reasons why it seems like Kevin Guskiewicz did leave Chapel Hill or is going to leave Chapel Hill. Yeah, but like you said, for me, I don't remember which podcast it was where I said that Mac Brown 2.0 was either reaching the end or was at the end for me. I think it might have been after the Georgia Tech game. And it was because you're always going to have results like this where you recruit a lot of guys on paper, but it seems like the coaching staff can't get the most out of them, or you're just always left wanting more. And I think some of the choices that the coaches are making and putting the players in positions, you're almost spotting teams' points when you're coming in this unprepared, and it's a consistent where the fan base is like, how did we lose to Virginia, a Virginia team? I watched the Virginia Tech Virginia game in my hotel room before I went to the NC State game. Virginia Tech destroyed them. And I've seen that Virginia team get destroyed time and time again this year. That team came into Chapel Hill with confidence in their game plan and beat Carolina. Georgia Tech, I still can't believe Carolina lost to Georgia Tech, that Georgia Tech consistently has our number. Can't believe that Carolina could come out that flat in a game that meant this much for both teams. And this is just kind of who they are. And when you hear them talk, and it doesn't really seem like they have the answers. And I do think there is a hesitation from Mac Brown to make staff changes. I'm not too confident that there's that sense of urgency there, or thinking that the staff is the reason why some of the problems for Carolina have transpired. So I don't really know where the program goes from here. If I'm glad I'm not making the choice. But if I was, I think I would. I just think you a new coach is what this team needs in the sense of getting the culture where Mac Brown got Carolina back on track, but now somebody else has to come in with this new voice and find a way to bring a team together and get the most out of your results. But yeah, it's tough. Transfer portal, Carolina's going to have a completely different roster if that situation did come up, and a new coach would have to be worried about keeping a roster intact or bringing people in. You saw what happened with somebody like Dion, where his team is entirely coming from the transfer portal. But the only thing I would kind of push back on with the Carolina's roster, from the time Mac Brown got here, I don't really think the roster is that much better. Besides the quarterback position, do you really see? Do you think is that something I might just have a blind spot for right now, or do you see a significant increase in the overall talent level from the roster in 2018 to where Carolina is at now?
I think on paper is what everyone sees is, yes, 247 Sports had us higher rated in the top 25. And, we technically signed more 5 stars and 4 stars than we had in the prior years, but we sure haven't gotten the production out of them. And Coach Brown's early years in, 2019, 2020, 21, our best recruits were Fedora players, or our best players were Fedora recruits. Javante, Mike, Diami, Chaz, Daz. Coach Brown has obviously brought in a bunch of guys. Jeremiah Gimmel was a Fedora guy. Drake Maye obviously was his recruit, and we've recruited well, but just we haven't developed those guys. And I know that was the frustrating thing of everyone, that's on Inside Carolina, is like, why can't we develop our 4 and 5 star guys like the Georgias of the world and the Bamas and the, you name Clemson's, you name it. And, I fought it early on and, kind of said that it just maybe maybe there's a multitude of reasons, but, it's shown year after year over the last, 3 or 4 years since we've been getting, high profile recruits. I don't think us and the recruiting services are both missing on guys. I think, if all these other programs want the Miles Murphys of the world, the Jabari Ritzies, the Des Evans, and we do too. And then, if they get to our program and they just aren't good players, like that's not true. We failed in their development. But yeah, I mean, like you said, going back to should Mac Brown be our coach next year, or, it's a very, you see it nowadays with all these buyouts and colleges and universities are so quick to fire these coaches. Obviously, Coach Brown has been here for 5 seasons now, but, I think ultimately Coach Brown has to look himself in the mirror and figure out if he's the right man to lead this program right now. Kind of how Roy Williams was at a crossroads late in his career of, his press conference was he figured out that he was not the right guy to lead the Tar Heels at that time. And Coach Brown has been the right guy at times in his career. In the 90s when he had major success, and then, when he came back in 2019, I do think he was the right guy for the job. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, he's got to look himself in the mirror and figure out if he is the right guy for this job. Because that's the biggest issue going forward. So,
yeah, and I don't think it's as simple as saying, "Hey, let's go get another defensive coordinator," or let's swap out this position coach for this. Is that kind of where you're at too, with thinking that you can't just?
We've tried that already. Think of all the ups and downs we've had in Mac's tenure, and then think of all the hirings and quote unquote firings that he's had. Scott Boone, 1 year as a special teams coordinator. Our special teams, have they gotten better?
No.
Jay Bateman, defensive coordinator. Everyone wanted him fired. Has our defense gotten better? Javon DeWitt, who was a special teams coordinator for a year or two. Like, obviously, Phil Longo, so like, yes, we've had some ups and downs, but at the end of the day, like, I think our team has pretty much seen the same success or lack of success, regardless of who's at OC, who's at DC, if Dre Bly's coaching the corners or it's Jason Jones, whoever. Like, I think it kind of stems from the head coach. So, we've tried it by hiring and firing offense and defensive coordinators and position coaches and special teams, but at the end of the day, we've kind of gotten the same result. So I think our issue is, we don't have the Saudis public investment fund at our disposal. Like, money's an issue with coaching. Like I'm going to go back and say, yeah, I think it's up to Mac Brown and what he truly wants to do. Because if he doesn't believe he's the right man for the job anymore, we're going to have to clean house and get a whole new staff. And, I do think it's deeper rooted than just production on the field this year. I think there's some behind the scenes things, and it is a major life change for the university to make a decision what to do with their football coach. The chancellor of the school, the men's basketball coach, and the men's football and the football coach are pretty much the three most important figures on UNC's campus. So this isn't, a decision you can make overnight. I think it's going to take a couple of days, but like I said, at the end of the day, it's up to Coach Brown, and he's got to do what's best for him and what he thinks going forward.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why I'm more bullish on North Carolina with the future under Mac Brown is the disconnect with the coaching staff, where before the season, Mac Brown said that this was the best coaching staff he's ever had, and the results are 500 in ACC play, sputtering to the finish, a bowl game where it's going to be a who cares bowl game. Wouldn't expect to see a lot of Carolina's best players even playing in that bowl game. And you're now on year 3 of that same consistent trend of sputtering, playing in one of these games somewhere that don't really mean a whole lot to the program. And it doesn't feel like – initially it felt like the team was trending in the right direction. Now it feels like we're going backwards. Like we were going up a hill, and now the car is lost all its gas, and we're slowly rolling back up. Few people, Drake Maye specifically is trying to push the car back up, but there's just only so much he could do. And that was another point I meant to say about this NC State game. I saw some people say like Drake Maye not playing like a top 5 pick, or he's playing his way out of being a top NFL pick. You could put any quarterback in the country behind that offensive line on Saturday night against that NC State team that came out with that intensity and that pressure and those looks. And there was just no way they were going to look good or have more success than Drake did. And I think Drake deserves a lot of credit for how much he battled in that game. Took a lot of shots. I'm pretty sure he's already banged up injury-wise before that game, and just his ability to keep fighting and keep trying to put this North Carolina team in good spots. I do think he deserves a lot of credit for that. But before we wrap up this episode, a big shout out to our friends at Congruity. Congruity is a North Carolina-based national coverage, local presence company with personal support straight from the Tar Heel State. They are empowering small and mid-sized business owners with HR and payroll outsourcing, enabling you to grow your business while they take care of your greatest asset, your people. And they are doing it with top-of-the-line technology and services for every stage of your business's growth with a state-of-the-art online platform. Congruity is obsessed with customer service. They become part of your team. They do the heavy lifting, providing essential admin support with a single point of contact and support available on demand with services that are tailor-made, transforming your organization. Congruity has helped hundreds of businesses improve and enhance their day-to-day lives. Level up your HR capabilities, save money, unlock game-changing growth. Visit congruityhr.com/Tar Heels to learn more about Congruity. Fill out a quick form to be connected to their consultants, and they'll give Inside Carolina listeners and viewers a payroll and HR assessment for free. That's congruityhr.com/Tar Heels. Shot. We're giving out our picks. Your record would be a lot better the past 2 weeks if you would stop picking Carolina. You're 5-5 overall. You've lost 2 games with Carolina the past 2 weeks. Without those 2 games, without those 2 bonus picks, you'd be tied with me at 5-3. I had Michigan -4. Big field goal for Michigan at the end of that game to cover that spread. You had Clemson -7. Clemson covered pretty handily against South Carolina. And then UNC loses as a 2-point favorite at NC State. Last pick of the conference championship. We're in conference championship week. You like the board this week? Where are you going?
Well, I think all that really shows is when I bet with my brain, I'm usually right. When I bet with my heart, I get beat. So luckily my heart's not in it this week. It's just my head. I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks -9.5 over Washington. If I could pick Max Brown's successor, it would be Dan Lanning. Whenever Mac Brown's time is up, I would pick Dan Lanning. Say I couldn't pick Kirby Smart or Nick Saban. I would pick Dan Lanning because he is one of the most impressive coaches. I think he's the full package. He's got his team rolling. Bo Nix is playing some good football, but they talk with their pads. They don't talk with their beaks because they're ducks. Get it? That was pretty funny. But I'm going Oregon Ducks -9.5.
I am going to the SEC championship. I'm going to take the Dogs. Give me the Dogs, man. I'm taking Georgia -5. Alabama, I think they're a bit up and down, as seen by needing a 4th and 31 conversion to beat Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium. I just trust this Georgia team a whole lot more, especially with Brock Bowers back. In Atlanta, those Georgia fans have had SEC championship tickets since they became available, where a team like Alabama might have not had the same level of confidence when they lost to Texas at the beginning of the year. So I think it's going to be almost like a home game for Georgia, and I think they need this game to make it to another playoff appearance and try to win their 3rd straight national championship. So I will take the number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, -5. Those are our picks of the week presented by Congruity. Shotman, appreciate the time as always, and appreciate everybody watching and listening.